So in order to start our workshop, we will have one presentation from Professor Ang. He will be setting the tone of this conversation, and he will be looking into what exactly is the fourth industrial revolution and what is the impact to society. So before I make an introduction, I would like to say that we'll have this one presentation and we'll have the panel of 6 members, a very exciting team with us today. And I'm looking forward to great conversations with you all. So let me introduce the speaker. Let me introduce the speaker. Professor Ang. Professor Ang is an associate professor in multimedia and digital systems at the School of Computing at the University of Kent. Professor Ang is involved in research in digital health and healthcare technology. Specifically, he focuses his research in 2 areas: artificial intelligence and virtual reality. We're very honored to have you today with us, Professor Ang, and without wasting any more time, please present to us your presentation. We would like to learn more about what you have to offer, and then we can have a discussion around this, and looking very much forward to this. Karibu sana, as we say in Swahili. Karibu sana.
Thank you for inviting me to the opportunity to share our experience, our research in this forum. I think I should start by sharing my screen. Just to check that if you can actually see my slide.
We see your slide. We can see your slide.
Right. Good afternoon. I'm Jim Ang. As has been introduced, I work in the University of Kent, and I'm super excited today to be here to share with you our research in digital health. There are 2 broad areas that we work in: immersive technology, virtual reality kind of technology, and sensing AI technology. Before I start, I would like to tell the story of 2 patients in our studies. Obviously, the details have been changed to protect their identities. John is 78. He has dementia. In 2013, he attempted suicide and was subsequently admitted to a psychiatric hospital and has been residing there since. He is a patient in our virtual reality study, where we study how VR can support dementia care. When we first met him, we asked a seemingly innocent question: "How is your family?" And to our surprise, he started crying. It turns out his family moved to Australia a few years ago. Despite that, he was still quite willing to try the VR headset. And when he put on the VR headset, showing the countryside with a mountain view, he started smiling, talking about his story growing up in Scotland. And this is an observation we made. He shared his experience with others, laughed and smiled when talking about it, commented it was the best day ever. Now, this is Maria. She's 21 and she's only 42 kilo. She has bulimia. She's very, very anxious and ashamed of her body. She's afraid to go out. She feels that everyone is judging her, including her therapist. Whilst John is locked in the hospital, Maria is kind of locked in her own home, an experience many of us had last year. Not a very pleasant experience, was it? In this project, we designed a remote VR therapy system which enables the therapist and the patient to log into the shared virtual environment to carry out the therapy. Now, as part of the virtual therapy, we asked Maria to recreate herself virtually. And this is what she created. In the interview, she said, "I felt really uncomfortable in front of this VR mirror trying to create yourself. It's just uncomfortable, it's miserable." But she also said, "I really liked it. It was a great experience and it helped me a lot. It helped me to understand several things about myself and my body and the concerns I have. I enjoyed it and it made me think a lot." In the past 10 years or so, I have been working with a range of people from all sorts of backgrounds and people with all kinds of health conditions. At a glance, these appear to be healthcare medical problems. It's incredibly tempting to seek a straightforward solution, a simple solution, maybe a pill or an app perhaps. But if we peel through the layers of these problems and look at them more deeply, we realize there are also social problems, organization problems, and technological problems in some cases. And these are all interlinked. This is a challenge-led research area I call human-centered healthcare technology. And the underlying theme of my research is the people with healthcare problems where digital technology could be part of the solution. A bit about myself, my background is in computer science, specializing in human-computer interactions. I've been working on this kind of research for more than 10 years, looking into VR and AI, how we can embed this in healthcare. I'm going to divide my talk into two parts. The first part deals with immersive technology, and the second part deals with sensing AI technologies. The first VR project I'd like to share with you is personalized dementia care. And our goal is to design VR, virtual reality, to support personalized and dignified dementia care. If you're not familiar with dementia, it is a general term for loss of memory, language, problem solving, and other cognitive abilities that are severe enough to interfere with daily life, and they affect mostly older people. So how can virtual reality help, you may ask? I'm glad you asked. Many people with dementia, especially in later stage, they need constant care and are normally restricted to their home or in some care facilities because of safety risks. With VR, you can go out, well, in air quote, go out and re-experience things that you no longer have access to, or even go to places which no longer exist. In this study, more specifically, we want to study if VR can be used to reduce behavior that challenges, including aggressive behavior, among people with dementia in secure psychiatric hospitals. We carry out a pilot study with 24 participants, 8 of them patients with dementia, and 16 caregivers. And among the patients with dementia, there's also a wide variety of diagnoses, including those with depression and schizophrenia. We use a portable mobile VR system. It's a kind of a smartphone-based, really low-cost system to stream audio and video 360 content of calming outdoor environments. We are quite fortunate now to have this kind of portable headset that can be easily deployed in the real hospital environment. So the summary of the result, we found that patients were observed to be happier after the VR intervention, and they also become more alert, which is something that you really want to see in patients with dementia. And this is an interesting quote from our observation. The patient at the beginning was very aggressive at the researchers, asking them to leave the room. This is one of the more challenging data collection we have to do in our research for the past 10 years. So we were shouted at, we were sworn at, but when the patient was using the VR, he appeared to enjoy being in his own world. We were later told that the patient could become agitated very easily, but yet surprisingly, he tolerated VR and used it for a maximum period that is allowed by the ethics committee. This work was widely reported by international media, and since the study, we have received funding from care homes and hospitals to support 3 PhD students to take this forward. Our grand vision is to design a solution for large-scale, real-world deployment in diverse care environment, linking this virtual experience with the healthcare they are receiving in the physical world. Now, the technology, I believe, can be used beyond dementia For instance, we are starting to work with clinicians in cancer care, end-of-life care, to provide therapeutic VR experience to help them cope with the physical suffering. In the next study, we look at people with eating disorder, which is a condition characterized by abnormal eating habit, for instance, obsessive desire to lose weight by refusing to eat. Unfortunately, these incidences of eating disorders are occurring at alarming rate among younger women. And usually people at risk, they are really reluctant to engage in treatment because of stigma, anxiety of dealing with body image issues. So we ask the simple questions. Can we design multi-user remote VR therapy system to support online therapy? Now, this is how it works. The patient and the therapist can be anywhere in the world. They put on their VR headset and were instantly teleported in the virtual therapist room. Both users are presented in the VR through some form of avatar. Well, not this exactly, but avatar is kind of a cartoon representation of themselves. The cool things about it is we can customize the environment and avatars, if you so wish, in any way you want, to better suit the therapy and the preference of the patient. And actually, I believe this is, in fact, the world's first VR remote therapy system. So we studied how effective it is. We recruited 14 female at risk of eating disorder at the average age of 20 to participate in the study. Long story short, we found a reduction in the score on troubling thoughts about their weight and body image after the VR therapy. And in the therapy, we actually asked the patient to create their own virtual body, as you've seen earlier in the slide. Once they've created the virtual body, then we gradually remove the clothing until the body is left only in underwear. This is part of the therapy process. And it was a very upsetting moment for many patients. A patient said in the interview, "I don't want to remove my clothes. I feel that I'll be embarrassed to be close to be naked in front of another person," referring to the therapist. However, I like that the therapist was not able to see me, and therefore she was not judging me because of how I look. I was my avatar, and that was my safety net. The study shows that patients can experience real emotion in the VR environment and learn to deal with this negative emotion in order to benefit from this therapy. The third study I'd like to share with you in the area of VR is in the area of pain management, specifically exercise pain. We're going to ask the question, do you like exercising, or do you find it uncomfortable or outright painful? Any big fans of gym, exercise, physical exercise? I absolutely hate it. I wish there was a way to reduce the discomfort and the pain and perhaps make it more fun. So our thinking is, what if we can design VR to trick people into exercising more and experience less pain? So this is our main question. So we designed VR and recruited 30 participants to go through some basic weightlifting exercise. So all they have to do is to hold this weight, this dumbbell in their hand for as long as they can. It's painful, but we want to see whether or not we can design VR that will make them do it better. So this is a VR environment they actually see when they're doing this exercise. They can see their body, you can customize the body, you can change the color of the clothing, and they also see the dumbbell, virtual version of the dumbbell as well. And to make it even more interesting, we would like to increase the sense of presence, which is a really important concept in VR, to make you feel like you're actually there. So we actually use a smartwatch to track the movement of their physical hand so that the virtual hand, as they see in VR, move according to the physical hand as well. So in this box, it shows what the user is actually seeing. Can you spot the difference between the virtual world and the real world? I hope that you notice that the size of the dumbbell is different. So this is the trick. The trick is we basically make it smaller. We make the dumbbell, the virtual dumbbell, smaller. And actually we have a few conditions. In one version it's smaller, in one version it's bigger. And in the third version is exactly the same. Now, what do you think? Did it work? Did the trick work? Well, I wouldn't be presenting it if it didn't work, right? So we found that it actually worked really, really well. We have actually since repeated the experiment with more than 100 participants. We found really strong effect here. We found that specifically all participants lasted 2 minutes longer when the dumbbell, the virtual dumbbell, was smaller than the physical one. And the heart rate actually also was lower in the experimental condition. And finally, we asked participants to report how much pain they felt, and we have the first minute of the understate condition is approximately 50% lower than the control and overstate condition. So to summarize our VR work, perhaps some of you might find it hard to believe, but the application of VR in healthcare has been researched for the past 30 years, perhaps even longer, since the 90s. But if you walk to any hospital today, it's unlikely that you will see any VR being used in the real world. It's because until only very recently, VR was very expensive and huge, they're bulky. Research was done mainly in the past in the lab environment, and it did not translate very well to clinical applications. Today's computers are more powerful, smaller, and cheaper. We now have portable VR, wireless, which is capable of creating virtual world, which is looking closer and closer to real life. So I think this is a very exciting time to do research and in VR, to do more research, not just research, but also development. And more importantly, to deploy VR in the real world environment. Now let's move on to the second part of my presentation, which is on sensing and AI. Our group has been doing a lot of work in using mobile phone, smartphone, and wearable technologies like Fitbit, smartwatches to sense people's behavior and emotion. So the big idea here is we want to be able to track and monitor people's health in the everyday life so that we can better inform timely intervention when it's necessary. In this particular study, we carry out an experiment with 40 healthy participants. They were walking around in the city wearing a range of sensors, wearable sensors. Specifically, we have on-body sensors that track their heart rate, their movement, skin conductance, and also environmental sensing as well, temperature, noise level, and we also have GPS location tracking as well. And we developed some AI algorithms, and we showed that using only GPS data alone, we were able to classify human emotion at the accuracy of 78%. So as they're moving around the city, we ask them to report on their phone how they feel. Are they feeling positive, negative, or neutral? This was pretty much in line with confirm a previous study in Cambridge that shows similar results using just location data. We also look at on-body data, physiological signals, and the result was better. And we will combine all three modalities, location, but physiological and environmental data, we got really, really good results. And these are really encouraging. And as you can imagine, it has a lot of interesting application in healthcare. And in fact, this is what we are currently doing. We are currently working with a hospital in Northampton to design algorithms to classify the severity of depression among patients with depression. Sure. We collected data from 25 patients going through treatment. And the patients were wearing Fitbit, tracking their physical activities and their sleep patterns. And they're also self-reporting their depression level using this standardized clinical scale called PHQ-9. So we're still analyzing the data. We just got the data, and the initial results are really promising. It seems to show that it is possible to predict a patient's depression level using Fitbits. So our vision here is to ultimately have a human-centered AI system where clinicians, patients, and AI work together to manage and improve people's mental health using wearable technologies. In the next study on AI and sensing, I'm going to show you something on game-based cognitive assessment. Sounds really weird, but bear with me, I'm going to explain how this works. So the question we are asking is, can a mobile game that you play on smartphone be designed to detect people with cognitive problems? Specifically in the study, we look at people with alcohol abuse problem. So the idea is to track people's gaming interaction on the smartphone and see if we can detect if this person suffer from cognitive deficit due to excessive alcohol consumption. So we use existing popular mobile games in the market because they are popular, but we developed some mechanism to track three things. So these are the games we actually use, and we track their gameplay pattern, the touch pattern, and also the device motion as well. And the idea is to use this data to predict if someone is an alcoholic. So we did a lot of analysis. I'm just going to show you the summary of the results. So we have two algorithms, random forest and logistic regression. And you can see across all three games, we're looking at around 90% accuracy, which is very promising. In addition, we also look at whether or not we can reduce the amount of data needed to make a prediction. So we have 10 minutes worth of data. We reduce it to 3 minutes. As you can see, we can still achieve relatively good performance even with 3 minutes of gameplay data. It's quite a robust result. The last project I would like to show in the area of AI and sensing is one thing, is something like we call Skintronics. So we would like to basically explore this exciting direction in non-invasive human sensing, where the goal is to design closer human-machine integration. So the question we ask is, how can skin-like flexible sensors be designed for healthcare applications? Now, sensors in the hospital currently look like this. They are not very easy to use and they take forever to put on. So in collaboration with Georgia Tech, we use aerosol jet printing techniques to basically print these flexible electrodes for high portability and high usability. So something that looks like this is a piece of ultra-thin flexible sensors that can be mounted on the human skin. And more importantly, we integrate AI within these sensors to track data in real time. Again, our ultimate goal is to empower people to take control of their well-being by using the sensors at home. So I'm going to show you a prototype that we developed where you have a skin sensor, which is really almost invisible. This tracks the EMG, the muscle activities of the throat. And basically the user just perform a swallow activity to control the game. So this is a simple game, just jump across the platform and so on. So this is to provide a fun and engaging rehabilitation for people with swallowing disorder. So the system really demonstrates the strength of this kind of sensor because it conforms really well with the curvature of human throat, where it would not be possible for traditional rigid sensor. The next study I'd like to show is actually the work of my PhD student, or my ex-PhD student, Diokachas, who is also here. This is basically using similar kind of AI sensor integration. We study how we can use it to detect the brain signal to control a wheelchair in this example. So we can see there are 5 blinking LED in different frequencies that will trigger specific brainwave patterns that we can capture and then translate into commands that would allow us to control wheelchair. In this case, we have 5 commands: forward, backward, turn left, turn right, or stop. The last project I'd like to show is actually quite interesting in the sense that this project brings the two directions of my research together, sensing and VR. So we integrate sensors, EMG sensors, with a VR headset to track people's eye movement. So this is the first kind of technology that integrate this kind of sensors with VR headset. So the idea again is to provide home-based therapy for people with eye disorders. Now, this is the conclusion. We come to the final slide. There are some real challenges in using this kind of technology, especially AI, machine learning in healthcare. Issues like data privacy, trust by the patients, and trust by the clinicians, doctors. We are not advocating replacing humans. To me, it is rather about a closer collaboration between machines, AI, and humans. I envision a future where the physical world and the virtual world are converging, where humans and machines are collaborating to solve some of the most pressing problems in humanity. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very, very much for this very insightful presentation. I'm sure we have all learned something from this presentation. Well done on the extensive research you have done in the area of virtual reality, using virtual reality for therapy, for dementia, for bulimia, and even for, for the gym, for some of us lazy people. But you're actually tackling the issue of pain, which is something that is a concern for many people. But also you have looked at the use of flexible sensors in Skintronics and in helping people get healthcare from their own homes. So it's a self-care, healthcare from their own homes through the examples you've given us with the brain signal control to move the chair around. I mean, that is, I think it's revolutionary and very empowering, especially in today's age where, we are going through so much with the current pandemic and the healthcare system. So you're actually bringing the healthcare closer to the person in their own home, which is, I think, something revolutionary. Thank you very much for these insights. We'll be sure to follow your research closely. I think we can also share your work. If maybe you can you can share some links to your research papers. If that
I'm happy
possible.
to share my URL. Actually, is probably. Are you still seeing my screen? Am I still sharing screen?
You're still sharing your screen, yes.
I have no idea how to stop it. I can actually. Okay. It's actually blocking me. So right. So this is my website. If you go over there,
I think even if you leave anything in the chat, if you leave it, we'll all get to see your.
No, this is embarrassing. I have no idea where the chat now is. Disappeared.
It doesn't matter. It's okay. We're all together in this. It's okay.
Okay, I think I find something. Okay, I found it. I'm going to stop my screen share and I see the interface now. Phew, it's back to normal.
It's back to normal.
Right, so this is my website. So you can see a lot of the details and the latest research papers and so on.
So I encourage people who are actually listening, who have listened to this presentation, jump on that LinkedIn and follow his research. And for all people who would like to even carry further with this research, I'm sure that they can be able to contact you and see how we can form a synergy to move forward. Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for the opportunity to share my work.
Up next, I would like to call the panelists to this discussion to react to this discussion. But first and foremost, I think it's best that I introduce all the panelists at the same time so that we get that out of the way. And then we dive in straight into the discussion. And then we actually follow up from your presentation, Professor Anne. So I'd like to start with Dr. Henry Mwanyika. Dr. Henry Mwanyika, hello. He is a certified enterprise architect and digital transformation advisor who serves as PAC's Digital Health Regional Director for Africa. Dr. Mwanyika is a trusted advisor to governments across Africa with more than 20 years of digital transformation experience in both the commercial and the public sector. He advises governments, companies, and NGOs on their digital transformation journeys through development of vision, creation, roadmaps that support the design, investment, and implementation of end-to-end integrated digital solutions. Karibu sana, Dr. Henry. Our next panel member is Dr. Diogratius. Okay. Advice here that I think it's best that each member introduces themselves. That way they will get to understand them even better. So I think I'll hand that over back to Dr. Mwanyika. Dr. Mwanyika, the floor is yours. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Henry Mwanyika, and I work as Path Digital Health Regional Director for Africa, and I'm based in Tanzania. And I'm looking forward to this conversation today.
Thank you very much. Karibu sana. I welcome now Dr. Diogratius. Dr. Diogratius, please introduce yourself.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Dr. Diogratius Mzurikwao. I'm not a medical doctor, so I recently finished my PhD in the application of artificial intelligence in healthcare under the supervision of Professor Jim Ang, who have just finished presenting. And I'm also with the Muhimbili University of Health and Allied Science, and I run a small company called Excellence AI, where we're developing artificial intelligence solutions in healthcare and finance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I call upon now Apollo, Mr. Apollo Temu. Kindly introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you. My name is Apollo Temu, and I've been in the industry for more than 20 years. Sometimes we're scared to give more numbers there because you give out some more secrets, you know?
Indeed, indeed.
Yeah, yes, I've worked in the financial services, and I've had some time within the healthcare sector as well, predominantly around the data initiatives. I can see my colleague there, former colleague, Dr. Henry Mwanyika. Yeah, I'm quite passionate about technology, really, and pretty much around our environment in this part of the world, and with the challenges that we have with the infrastructures and what have you. So listening to Dr. Gang there, quite interesting to see how such brilliant initiatives could actually be useful within the context of countries like Africa, like Tanzania in Africa. I currently work as a chief executive officer for a company called Imara Horizon, which caters for various services within the healthcare sector. That's pretty much for me for now. Thank you. I look forward to this discussion there.
Thank you very much. I now call upon Ms. Chogo.
Yeah, my name is CP Sandra Chogo. I used to be a medical personnel, a clinical officer, but I now work as an accountant and as an auditor. I'm a senior auditor to the Office of the Controller and Auditor General. I'm passionate about technologies of the fourth industrial revolution. And as we are speaking, I'm already a trainer for the accountants in Africa in relation to the technologies of the fourth industrial revolution. I'm the author of this book, Jielimishe Kuhusu Blockchain, the fourth industrial revolution. In the fourth industrial revolution, I specifically look at the way blockchain is changing the accounting, the medical field. But again, I critically look at the Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency, and the way they are changing the financial industry. How are we going to regulate Bitcoin? How are we going to regulate cryptocurrency? So that's what I'm looking more critically into. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mr. Deji.
Yeah. Thank you very much. My name is Deji Mabogunje. I am a technical advisor and generally just a fan of technology. I am a geek, as they say. My day job is as a consultant with McKinsey & Company. And what I generally do is help organizations navigate the journey through digital transformations, specifically how they can innovate and how they can improve their services, increase client and consumer experiences. And everyone is very interested in how the fourth industrial revolution is going to change that. So a lot of focus on how we prepare, increase readiness for this revolution, and how we can, as best ride the wave and really benefit from it, not just as organizations, but as a society. I'm very excited about this conversation and look forward to a healthy debate.
Yes, we've just heard the presentation by Professor Ang. How can you relate to that? Any feedback on that? Any response from that?
I was blown away by some of the applications from the healthcare industry. I think it's amazing the impact that it actually has on the mind and the human condition. I haven't even looked at it from that perspective. My focus tends to be around organizations, business and services, but from an actual impact to human beings and improving the quality of life is amazing. So that's very inspiring stuff to hear.
Amazing. So we'll be back. Let's move on to the next panel member, and we'll be back when we'll keep expounding on this issue. Mr. Samir, karibu.
Asante, thanks for having me. My name is Samir. I am the CEO of a company called Celcom in Tanzania. We are a payment systems provider under the central bank. I must say I feel like a fish out of water. Everyone's talking about health, but then again, I think it's quite relevant that the fourth industrial revolution is actually making great advances in the medical space. And generally, I think one of the main issues that I think, and one of my regrets, are that I was on the Aga Khan Health Services board about 15 years ago, and back then it was very nascent. We didn't have access to any of these great technologies that we have today: access to data, access to various ways to measure the human condition, the movements, and the reactions that we can get from technology and different components. So very excited to be here, and I think I'll walk away having learned something new, and perhaps we can come up with more applications around what we do. But glad to be here.
Absolutely, thank you. How would you react to his presentation? Because yes, you're no longer in the space, but it is an opportunity to even merge those two worlds. Like, how would you react to that?
Look, I've been following Singularity for a very, very long time, up to a point whereby you probably want to be averse of robots and computers taking over human functions and our existence as a whole. I think it's scary on the one hand, but I think it's very manageable. The more we leverage technology, the more we leverage the various research and results that are yielded from that. I think we can change the way we work, the way we efficiently exist and coexist with technology and AI specifically. I think notions around deep learning and AI and robotics has a scary effect on humans generally. I think more so around job displacements and whatnot, but I think there's a whole sphere that can allow us to coexist, and I think that's where that's what we should aim for.
Yeah, we should look at the brighter side, as well as being aware of all the challenges which are there. Okay, we'll be back with you, Mr. Samir. Thank you very much. Let's start our panel discussion. I'd like to start with Dr. Deogratias. I'm starting with you because you are directly linked to Professor Ang, and you have worked together and you are in the space of artificial intelligence. So it only makes sense for me to start with you. You have done your PhD in artificial intelligence. You have done extensive research. You're currently in Wimbili, and you have projects related to AI. And as we know that AI is the primary driver of the fourth industrial revolution. Being in this space, tell us a little bit about your projects in relation to AI in our current environment, Tanzania, and just share with us what you have been doing and what we can learn from you.
Thank you very much for first having me and for the question. And I'm very happy to also have Professor Jim Ang in this panel, and also see on how we are going to transform this kind of research from the Western world to our local settings. And I'm very happy we have some major local players. For example, Mr. Samir from Celcom, who I believe they've been producing tons of data. And this is one of the challenges which practitioners of artificial intelligence are facing. So basically, there are 4 challenges which I would like first to mention to other panelists on how we can address these challenges and accept the technology in our local setting. First, we have a problem in capacity building, as we have around just 2 universities in the country which offers data science or AI-related courses. We don't have many universities offering this kind of courses, so we are lacking. We are lacking enough number of practitioners. Another one, and it was also mentioned by Sandra, about the regulations. There are very few African countries with regulations around AI. So looking into the first challenge, where we don't have enough practitioners, and on the second one, on the regulation, so many people are teaching themselves AI from the online, like the YouTube, the Google. Now try to assume this kind of people who are teaching themselves, not because they chose to, very few universities in Africa offering the course, so they have to teach themselves in their bedroom. And there's no regulations around that. I remember there's a project back in Kent, which I worked with Professor Jim Ang, and we had to shut it down just because we later realized the data set which we were working on, it was not balanced. So it is because I was working under him, and due to ethical consideration, that's why that project was shut down. Now try to imagine someone who is working here in Tanzania have access to data set without regulations around that, which kind of products we are going to have in our society, the negative impact we are going to have. Another point I would like to mention, I came back home, is data sharing. As I mentioned, for example, Cellcom, they're producing tons of data. Look at the telecom companies, they're producing tons of data every day, but this data is not analyzed to that level. So we end up, practitioners of artificial intelligence, we end up using publicly available data sets from the US, from the UK, which don't really reflect the real problem. For example, if you analyze data set from mobile transactions, we can actually know when exactly people are doing transaction, to what level, to what age, to who. This can give insights to people in finance community to know where to intervene in terms of access to and inclusion to finance. Also, another one is resistive to change. There are many organizations which are still resisting on how to accept this new technology. They still want to maintain the old standards of doing things. They don't want to accept local practitioners who are doing AI and have solutions for local problems. So these are just few of the challenges which we are facing. And I'm calling upon all other players, and I'm glad Mr. Samir is here, people who have access and they are custodian of data. I'm just lucky to be in Mwimbili, so I have access to healthcare data. But there are other practitioners who are not in these public institutions, so their access to data is much difficult. So I'd like to ask these other big companies who are producing tons of data to allow practitioners and regulate them on how they're going to use this data for betterment of our society. Thank you.
Dr. Dare, you bring a very, very, very important point. Yes, data is an area that is kind of murky. It brings a lot of insecurity, and we all want to get a hands-on data, especially as researchers, especially as wanting to ride on the 4th industrial revolution. So I hear your prayer, I hear your plea that you're asking companies to open doors and to open their banks of data so that we can deep dive in them and find sense from that data, as opposed to letting it just stay. You also mentioned that the challenges of capacity building and regulation around artificial intelligence and data ethics. What is your plea for that? How do you think that we can overcome these challenges? You brought the challenges to the table, but how can we move forward? This is the platform that I'm sure many people are listening to, and we'll get feedback later. But what is your strategy? What is your opinion on how we can move the needle forward?
I think we need to bring in government players, people who are developing these regulations, because I'm a bit scared if we regulate too much, we are going to control innovation. Regulating too much, it will kill innovation. So instead of people who are developing these rules and the regulation, instead of them sitting alone or with people who are not practicing artificial intelligence and these other fourth industrial revolution technologies, they are going to implement some regulation which will be there will be a high chance of killing innovation. So they can bring in practitioners and also bring in global players, not like developing our own source as reinventing the wheel, but look at the work Professor Jim Ang is doing. We can have these global players of artificial intelligence who have been in the industry for years, what they know, pitfalls, the kind of things they've gone through, and add on what we have here locally to make sure we are going to develop good AI solutions for our environment. So it's just to come together for the government players, practitioners, and the global players to develop this kind of regulations. Thank you.
Thank you. And how can we ensure sustainability? Sustainability is one tricky thing as well. How do we ensure sustainability that whatever that we are thinking of creating now will last so that our grandchildren and our grandchildren get to see whatever that was created now? How can we create that enabling environment? It's a follow-up on the previous point, but the issue here is I'm stressing on sustainability.
Okay, as I've mentioned, these organizations which they are custodian of data set, if they open up to data sharing, it means all the kind of innovation which are coming out of this, they are going to be accepted into these organizations. So through acceptance, it is going to generate other sources of revenue, which can go back into research and development to produce other solutions. Most of the AI solutions, they are not here to replace human. It has been mentioned by Professor Jim Ang. They're not here to replace human. So people who are like, let's say doctors, they shouldn't resist having an AI solution which can diagnose disease. But accepting this kind of solution will lower their diagnosis time. They can see more patients. And by seeing more patients, it means they are going to generate more income, which can go back to support this innovation and make it sustainable.
Yes,
thank you
very much for your insight. On Dr. Henry. Dr. Henry, you have been in the digital transformation space, advising governments for a number of years, and you're in the health sector. How would you say that the health sector has transformed in Africa as well in Tanzania over the past decade?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So for me, when I look back in terms of the three previous industrial revolutions, if you look at 1 and 2, where physicians used to go to visit patients in their homes, and then we had steam engines, then we had electricity in the second, then in the third, now things started to change because now doctors and physicians had access to computers, because that was the computers were born, and mobile phones. So we moved from lower continuum of care, meaning that doctors had no easy access to data. So introduction of electronic medical records enabled them to have a record of the previous visits and access them in an easy way. So the quality of healthcare delivery started to improve. And we are seeing a lot of, and now because we are in the era of non-communicable diseases, where you have chronic diseases that really require continuous care. So when you look at the fourth industrial revolution and the introduction of Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, we started to see the change in the way medical care is delivered. So now it's not necessary for you to be in front of a doctor for them to diagnose on certain diseases. We are seeing now a doctor can predict what's going to happen to you before you even walk through their doors by using wearables. But also today, a professor mentioned today that now people in 2 different locations can be in the same room virtually, and they can communicate with each other as if they are next to each other. So we are seeing a shift in terms of how healthcare is delivered. But also all these innovations, now they are making things easier. So access to quality of healthcare is increasing, because we've just seen, I think last year, where someone who was in Barbados operating somebody who is in different continent. So you can see now surgeons can be in vacation, and then yet they can continue working and operating people who are across the world using robotics. At the same time, we're seeing a lot of the 3D printing has changed the way we deal and we look at organ donation. So now we're using 3D printing, you can print or you can create some organs. So there's a lot of things that are happening in the past decade that will contribute a lot to the quality of healthcare that is being delivered. But data, all in all, data is a critical component of that. We need to have data that we can use for us to be able to deliver that healthcare.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. I'm glad that you mentioned data. The word data keeps coming up. And as you know, that data has also been a very controversial topic in terms of ethics and data protection. And have you experienced that as a challenge with the adaptation, and the digital transformation in the health sector, particularly in Africa, particularly in Tanzania?
Yes, we've seen quite a lot. And I'll give an example in terms of digital transformation when we deal with health sector. So a good example, in many African countries, health data belongs to a facility. Let's start with that. Now, if data is generated in facility A, but a doctor in facility B needs access that data to make informed decision about a patient who happened to visit another facility at some point, that legal issues can create and can hinder adaptation of digital technologies. But at the same time, also for you to be able to share data, for example, if you look at border community, in East African community, for example, border communities, there's a lot of diseases that are going across the borders. So how do we control that? We can control that by sharing data. But now, to share data between countries is not a simple matter. Yeah. There's a lot of gymnastics that needs to, you have to go through for you to be able to share data across the border. So you have the intention of the health sector to transform. You have the legal framework that we have all experience of this. It's very slow to adapt to current situations. But also you have people in between who maybe they've read an article about the danger of people accessing their data, unethical access to their data. As a result, they may refuse to share that data. So you have people aspects of it, and you have, institution good, because private sector sometimes when they share with a competitor, they may feel that they're losing their competitive edge. So we have a lot of things that are coming together when it comes to data sharing, but we have this technology that you can take for granted for you to improve the way you do business. So there's a lot of things that needs to be done. And we've seen now countries trying to change their legal framework, change their policies, introducing new acts, like Tanzania is going through now. Data Protection Act is coming up pretty soon. So countries are changing, but I would say not fast enough. So the technology is always pulling us and is ahead of us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Henry. What I'm hearing you now is a plea for open data. We're hearing this, the prayer for data. Samir, I'm bringing it back to you. I have to bring it back to you. The people have spoken. They want data.
Yeah.
What do you have to say about this?
I think it's key, right? I mean, for us in our industry in the financial services space, data is a key component to growing the customer base, for upselling, cross-selling services, for retention, and for acquisition. And it's the single most important component if you want to sustain yourself as a business. Now, the biggest problem we have is I don't think the lack of a Data Protection Act is necessarily a bad thing. I think it's being used as an excuse by incumbents to not to share data because they're using privacy as an excuse not to share.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, look, you're talking about this fourth revolution whereby you have access to faster computers and faster handsets. You've got access to communications and the internet. You've got access to AI and deep learning, right? All of these are accessible more readily and they cost a lot less, which means access to technology means everyone wants to own the customer. And as a result of that, everyone is protective of that data so that they don't have to pass it on to a competitor. No matter what field you're in, once you start sharing data, you lose that advantage. So even if you're anonymizing data and sharing it, it's still you giving away something that you feel is yours because the customer belongs to you. Now, if you look at places like China, they didn't overregulate the space, and as a result, that space grew really, really quickly because access to data was availed. You look at Europe, they're overregulating it, and as a result, everything becomes a privacy issue, and everyone gets sensitive around data, right? But I think what we need to do here as an industry, and this is maybe the health sector, the financial sector, the banking sector, every single sector that's generating data needs to come up with a view that the data belongs to the individual, and then it becomes the individual's prerogative to share it with whoever they want. And as a result of that, I can share it with my bank, I can share it with my healthcare provider, I can share it with my insurance company, and that allows a proliferation of data at a massive scale. And I think hopefully that's where the Data Protection Act will take us, whereby the data belongs to the individual and it's up to them to then volunteer it to whoever they want, and it becomes. Are you looking forward to that? I think everyone on this call is looking forward to that.
Samir, you're in this space, you're in the fintech space, automation of processes as much as possible, and it's a place that has made people uncomfortable, depending on who is actually looking at that. You know, some people will look at it like not necessarily a good thing. Some people look at it as a bad thing. What I want to drive here is the recent Luku fiasco, you know, with the systems that have automated but went wrong. How would you speak about this?
Look, we used to, like, until GPG, we used to process 70% of the Luku traffic in Tanzania across multiple channels. And the honest truth is that platform is extremely stable. And look, with technology, anything can go wrong. And in my view, it's extremely unfortunate that 3 out of 4 HSMs went bust at one go. So it's unfortunate, but it's possible. And as a result of that, because there's such a high dependency, because we take it for granted, right? We don't buy Luku a month in advance. We buy it. Some people buy it on a daily basis. Some people buy it on a weekly basis because we take it for granted. It's available. It's there. It's accessible, and you don't really need to overthink it, right? And this is where we kind of become victims of our own comfort, whereby all of a sudden it's not available, and then we need to end up sleeping in the dark. I think it's unfortunate on TANESCO's part. I don't think it's anyone's fault. I think, but on a grander scale, if you have 4, I think if you have 4 HSMs and 3 die, you have had redundancy in place, and yet you've had a bad incident.
But what can we learn from this? What can we learn from this whole thing on a grander scale? And not to pick on them, but there's a lesson around. There could be a lesson around here on way forward, and what do we need to do to the industry?
I think you can segment distribution because electricity generally is divided between generation and distribution, right? So if your distribution is and a lot of countries such as South Africa, Namibia, they have different distributors, and therefore the entire country doesn't go down at the same time, right? So if you had regional distributors who had regional capacity to vend electricity, then the whole country wouldn't go down at the same time, right? So if it affects Dar, the rest of the country is still okay. If it affects Mwanza, whatever, the rest of the country is fine. I think that segmentation or that distribution of mission critical, life critical service would help a lot.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'd like to speak to Mr. Temu. Mr. Temu, How would you react to what Mr. Samir has just said right now, comparing the current environment in Tanzania versus your global experience? Sorry, can you unmute, Mr. Tim? Can you please unmute?
Sorry. Yeah, I think Samir has been talking. There's one point I caught there. He mentioned about the comfort that people get into in terms of the type of solutions that they're using. But I'm trying to also reflect on the sort of economy side of things. People have different levels of income and what have you. So they tend to actually stick to a certain pattern, which one may call it a comfort, yeah. And but for them, it could be affordability and such things. So when I hear about all these challenges within the technology space, quite a few things tends to be sort of shared, whether you're talking the health.
Mr. Tim? I think Mr.
Same
Tim
repeating pattern.
Sorry, Mr. Tim, we left you. You left us there. Can you repeat, like, just go back a little bit?
Oh, okay. Where did you lose me? I think I had a connection there. Yeah. Basically, I was trying to say that most of these challenges, they tend to be very similar in different sectors. If you're in the health, especially around the technology, whether in the health sector or in the financial services. And one theme that tends to keep repeating is about regulations. It's about the transformation, the journey of the users and the customers, the experience they face. But I tend to think like we need to approach these things in a sort of a holistic way, but I'm not a political scientist, but to actually reflect on the politics and the economies that are actually involved. By this, I mean, if we have, like now we're talking about regulations in the country, if the regulations are going to be with the attitude of actually not controlling in a sense of starving the innovation, but actually encouraging it and create more competition. It means if you're talking about electricity in terms of distribution, maybe you can have multiple players in there. So they'll be competing to give the best services. If you're talking about financial services, you could have open data. You could allow the banks to actually open data for users to be able to, you could be banking with bank A and bank B, and you have your accounts at bank A and be able to access your banks in other banks from the same platform. Those kind of experiences, I think if the drive is to actually move forward with the transformation, not just a change, but actually transformation, I think these matters need to be looked at the holistic picture. And now we have this ministry of ICT. I think they should really zoom into all these areas and look at the whole landscape in trying to actually put up an environment where growth and wealth creation is a drive, and services, improved services, quality services to the end users. And it should cross all the sectors, private sector, public sector, everywhere.
Thank you, Mr. Temu. I see what you're driving at. You're saying that it should be looked at from the top to bottom approach. But how can it be also looked at from the grassroots level, from bottom to up, as individuals, as each one of us to take part?
The grassroots are definitely, what has been happening now has been very organic. It's actually the grassroots which are driving, but like Dr. Henry mentioned there, it's like at the higher level, it's almost you're trying to catch up. But if the higher level actually encourages the grassroots in terms of environment which is friendly to competition, useful competition, not stifling, not saying, oh, this is my customer, you don't get data from me, or you allow the customer to look at, for example, e-commerce. Even with the existing infrastructure we have, with the mobile phones, with the telcos that we have these point of sale terminals. the adoption is not as good as it could be, even with the existing technologies that we have. And most of the time you'll find it's the culture. People are not used to that. They think if I use that, I'll be losing money, or maybe I'll be taxed more. All these kind of noises, which I think they've been left to their own devices and being touched very casually, as opposed to the whole thing being looked at from talk of a digital economy, for example. Look at the whole landscape and say, we have to put technology at the front with a view to actually have to grow the economy faster, to improve services, to gain efficiencies, the whole entire thing about transformation. And not just mere changes. I sometimes say what we sometimes see is actually a manual form being converted into a digital form, and that's it. And we call that transformation or that a change. It shouldn't be that. I think we should be looking at all these challenges in a much more holistic way, and then potentially have a roadmap to tackle one issue after the other. And it can be a combination of bottom up and top going down. Rather than coming up with one legislation for this item, and then next time another legislation for that item, and then go back and change the previous one. I think the time has come for a country really to actually look into this in a whole holistic manner. Link up the economy of the country, talk about digital economy, talk about super health services, talk about services to the rural areas, talk about financial services, about financial services reaching out to all the remote places, looking into a whole spectrum of things, even the charges. When I say it about regulation, I don't mean stifling regulation. The regulation that encourages growth, encourages sustainability. And then I think that way we'll be going to the right direction.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for that contribution. I would like to take this discussion to Mr. Deji. Mr. Deji, you recently took part in a one-year secondment program where you moved across Africa advising the banking sector on how to how to take part in the digital transformation. What has been your experience throughout that? First of all, just let us know what has been the experience and what has transpired from this whole transformation of the sector, the banking sector, but also just comparing Tanzania versus Africa as a whole.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's interesting though, something that I believe Samir said that I experienced a lot, which is this notion that data is an asset of the organization as opposed to the population that the organization serves. And that was always a challenge. And what we found in a lot of organizations that partake in a value chain is that the value chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And if any link in that chain does not have access to the data it needs, that ultimately reduces the impact that that chain can have on a society. So being able to share data, understanding that data is an asset of the population that you're serving, whereas maybe the intelligence that you derive from that data is your asset that you own, improves the entire value chain for everyone, grows the size of the market that you're serving, and ultimately rewards everyone that partakes in that value chain. That's one of the hardest lessons that we have trying to convince organizations that when they have data strategies, they should really think about, what part of this data do we believe is foundational, right? Foundational to the industry we serve, foundational to our customers, and should be accessible by them. Then what is intelligence that we do want to protect, right? What are our privacy concerns? And we find a lot of organizations just don't have very thought through strategies for data. And that's why they end up in the situations that they're in where either due to the architecture of their systems, sometimes they're incapable of opening up their data because it opens up everything, because it was not built in a way where you could segment your data appropriately. So that was a big learning for me as I traveled through the continent. The other one was also around capability building and having technology organizations within your company that had the capacity and the capability to keep up with technology changes. as I'm from Nigeria, and I guess when I came to Africa, I didn't expect to see as many foreign consultants as I did. And I realized that it wasn't necessarily due to a lack of knowledge or skill sets, but there also seemed to be a mentality of or perceived notion of quality from the banking and other organizations that we worked with. So being able to build and establish a trust and a transparency where organizations are able to level local talents, right, to help build these platforms, data platforms, systems, services that ultimately drive the user experience or the consumer experience. And I think one thing that also happens is that there's a lack of trust from your consumers in the system in general. And because there's a lack of trust, there's a lower quality of data being collected. You increase the trust, you increase the transparency, you get higher quality data, you have more intelligent analysis, and you're able to improve the services that you provide. So a lot of the organizations I worked with were struggling, one with just foundational architectural, structural issues around data and systems, and then also transparency and trust with their consumers.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Deji. Through your travels, through your consulting and talking to different banks, advising them on the digital transformation strategies, did the issue of jobs come up? And how did you tackle that issue of jobs? Because it is a main concern with the digital transformation. With automation, it means there will be a shift of jobs. All jobs will go out the window, and possibly new ones. We don't even know what new jobs are we expecting when we're telling people to skill up and to seek new occupations. What should they be looking at, and how do we protect the livelihoods of people while we are transitioning digitally?
Yeah, that's really a really important factor in all of this, is that as organizations try to innovate and try to grow and usually consider just the bottom line, they tend to leave people behind, right? And a lot of what we say to our clients is that, the human factor is very important, and it should be part of the conversation from the beginning. Yes, we want to innovate. Yes, we want to improve and automate our systems, but what are we doing about the people that work for us? Where do we need to upskill them? What are the new jobs we need to create? What are the trainings we need to put in place so that they have the skills to benefit from all these innovations that we have? A lot of companies tend to, look at cost savings as a way to drive profits as opposed to innovation. The difference to me is that innovation creates opportunity, right? So yes, you brought in a new platform that does these really cool things, but now you're creating an entire ecosystem for add-on services, right? That all require additional skill sets, and if you're going to uplift your user journey, then you now have additional opportunity to provide upsell new services to them, right? Now they all have mobile phones. What else can we do? Well, let's build some really cool apps. So let's get some software developers. Let's get some testers. Let's get additional profiles of people that can help grow this new area that we're interested in. And instead of replacing people, let's transition people into new roles.
Thank you very much. I'll come back to this topic. But first, I'd like to talk to the First Lady of the school. First Lady of the school, Ms. Chogo. Ms. Chogo, are you there? Ms. Chogo? I think Ms. Chogo, Sandra Chogo. Sandra? I think she stepped out. So we'll carry on with this topic. Same topic on jobs. Dr. Henry, what is your what are your 2 cents on where the next set of job requirements will be at? What is your 2 cents on that?
Yeah, thank you. So there's always a talk about if you digitalize or if you automate, you're going to lose some of the jobs. For me, the way I look at it is that I'm going to do a different jobs tomorrow because the jobs that I'm doing, which is repetitive today, will be replaced by machine. I give an example in some of the innovations that people are looking at. You have repetitive surgeries like appendectomy. People envisioning a world where in the future you can walk into a pharmacy, buy a box, you come home, you put it on your stomach, it operates you, you throw it away. Now, of course, surgeons will be probably crying because we feel that their jobs are being taken away. But I don't think so, because I think they will be able to train machines to do those operations better so that they can focus on other research on other aspects of the work. So instead of replacing and we being redundant, for me, I think we are going to be doing different things because the things that we used to do in the past are being replaced by machines who sometimes can be more accurate than us because of this repetitiveness. Also, if you look at the data, so for example, when you are digitalizing, you are equipping healthcare workers or you're equipping frontline workers to collect data, which means you don't need data entry clerks, but you're opening another area of work, which is data analysis and data scientists. So you are removing the need of having data entry clerks, but we are creating a need of having different skill sets that can be utilized to achieve the same objective. So for me, it's all about task shifting, not about replacing or people being redundant.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that contribution. And now let's move to question and answer from the participants, from people who have joined in. I can see questions coming in. I'll read them. How do we address the inequality when it comes to these fourth industrial revolution technologies, given that broadband is not available, accessible, and affordable to everyone, rural versus urban? Because it is all about who gets the benefits of these technologies and the results they help produce. This is a question which I think I'll pose this question to Samir.
Thank you for throwing the hardest question at me. No, I think it's actually a question that is, I think, misconceived. I was reading something on the Wall Street Journal literally 2 days ago, whereby the rural access to broadband just outside of New York or just outside of Washington, D.C. is so atrocious that, okay, given the standards that they set, like a good connection is a 25 Mbps connection, and that's the bare minimum you should have in the US if you're measuring connectivity and access to the internet. And the pricing, the capping, the quality of service is so atrocious that they feel like most of the US, even today, about 40% of the US today does not have access to good, reliable broadband. I think if you look at Tanzania, I was on a panel with Tigo yesterday. We've got about 40% data coverage. 2G is about 80%, 3G is 40, and 4G is about 20, I believe, somewhere around that, which means we have access to basic data. Now, what do you do with that data, right? Like, access means, are you actually spending time on social media and catching up with the news, or are you actually using it to develop your skills? These are two very different things, right? If you're talking about just consuming social media, you're fine, right? You have access to data and you're covered. But if you're trying to get into self-learning, I think Deo mentioned that you want access to, because there aren't enough courses at universities, and then someone in the question answer said there are a number of courses in East Africa. If you're trying to self-learn, self-educate, yes, you need better quality and higher broadband. And this is something that's an ongoing mission with the Universal Access Fund, which is building backbone with the telcos who are expanding and trying to reinvest their return earnings into expanding the network. So it'll take time because, again, we're leapfrogging legacy infrastructure, right? We didn't have fiber in the ground. And as a result, these rollouts take a while and it takes a lot of investment. And even by the time you get access to data, you need to find ways to utilize that access to connectivity and the internet. So I think it's a patience game for sure. We're not there yet, but I think everyone is doing their part. And again, the new Ministry of ICT has a mandate to make sure that 80–90% of the population is covered by 2025. So we'll get there. And 2025 is not that far away. We're talking 3.5–4 years. So I think it'll get there. And as you get more utilization, you get more people using the service, it will drive the cost down as well, right? I remember when we started the broadband business for a while, we were paying $85,000 for an STM1, which is 155 Mbps. Today you can get an STM1 for $3,000 to $5,000, right? So it's definitely making its way down, and we'll have better access over time. So that's my view.
Patient game. Professor Ang, what are your 2 cents on this?
On equality,
yeah,
lots of discussion, really a lot of discussion, even within the UK. Like Samuel just said earlier, there's certainly a division between the urban and the rural area, and I don't really have any solution to this. Just apart from to add that the problem goes beyond accessing broadband. The problem is also the data you are producing by certain, for instance, subgroup in the population. They are just not being used in training this kind of intelligence. So you've seen a lot of those controversial problems where you have, for instance, ethnic minority groups not being recognized by the system, partly because the training data doesn't contain information from that particular group. So having access to the broadband connection is the very fundamental problem, but this problem of equality goes deeper than just having access. We need to recognize that technologies are created probably by a bunch of well-off people and usually for similar kind of people they are creating this technology. It is a really difficult problem that requires a lot of working together across the private sectors and the government. It's not something that you can just wave your magic wand and make it go away. It is going to be very serious, especially if you are thinking about using, for instance, there were some studies on job interview. I mean, speaking of job, jobs, number of jobs, we are kind of in the transition period, at least from what I can observe, where the number of job is actually quite, it's not catching up with the growth of population, let's say. I wouldn't say it's decreasing, but it doesn't catch up with the growth of population, meaning more people are applying for fewer jobs effectively. It basically, because of this, for every single job application, you have so many applicants that this kind of job of screening applicants has been taken over by algorithms in recent years in some companies. And you can see how scary it could be if you are from a specific group of people where the data are not actually included in the training of this screening algorithm. So it basically means you'll never get a job. It's kind of a spiraling down out of control kind of situation. So it's quite a valid issue, and it is something that needs to be at the forefront of any discussion in artificial intelligence, data access, to be aware of the issue of inequality. And it shouldn't just benefit companies and businesses. It's the people that we need to develop this technology for. So I'm afraid I don't have a solution to this problem, but apart from to highlight a few other dimensions of these issues of inequality.
Professor Ang, you have actually given us food for thought. So sometimes we might not have the answer, but we might feed into creating the answer. So what you've done there is given us very much to digest. So thank you very much for your feedback. I'd like to move on to the next question because we have a number of questions coming in. This one is pretty long. It is from Paul Kaunda. Majority of African countries, including the entire East African region, is signatory to the China MOUs on BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, and the Digital Silk Road DSR. The latter capitalizes on China's engagement in Africa by providing internet connectivity, artificial intelligence, digital networks, building telecom networks, etc., with massive funding, to say the least. African digital infrastructure is almost 100% controlled and run by China's state-backed companies like Huawei, ZTE. These companies, amongst others, also supply high-tech surveillance devices to African governments, which in turn use them as digital apprehension tools to citizen, political opponents, and government critics. Do you think it is the right time now to have a constructive discussion on continental digital sovereignty to address issues like lifelong high-quality access of STEM education to majority of Africans, privacy and online security, etc.? I'm going to leave this question on to you, and then we'll throw the question and bounce it around to other participants. It's a mouthful. How would you respond to that? Professor Ang.
So you're asking this question to me? Okay.
Yeah, I'll throw it around to everybody, but I'll start with you.
Absolutely, I think it's never too early to actually think about these kind of issues. Who owns what? Essentially, this is the kind of issue we've been talking about earlier. Whether individuals should own the data, or companies, or government, and now we're kind of taking this discussion to a higher level. So whether or not data that are generated by the citizens should stay within the country. And in fact, we have, for instance, I can give an example in the UK, NHS data, which is a National Health Service data, which is a highly, highly sought after, valuable data. American companies are literally begging the UK government for this kind of data. Google, Microsoft, they want this data because this is kind of a unified, single, largest healthcare data set because of the NHS system, how it's set up. This is something that definitely the government is not very keen to let it go to the Americans. So certainly we can see we have actually done some study with NHS, with a company actually creating e-patient system that basically store patient data. And we constantly get email from Microsoft about these studies, and they are showing so much interest in this kind of study. So to respond to these questions, obviously I'm less familiar with the geopolitical issues of China and Africa, but I can certainly see the similarities, and I can draw some sort of analogy here to say that I think this is absolutely an important issue, that resources, data are resources, and resources need to benefit the people where the resources are seated, basically, is my sort of most direct answer to these questions.
Thank you very much, Professor. I'd like to pose the same question to Mr. Deji. Mr. Deji, you've been moving across the continent, and how has this been, from your experience, what have you seen in relation to this question?
Thank you. Yeah, this is a thorny one, right? I have my personal beliefs around data democratization, and I kind of think of this in terms as a software programmer. I kind of relate this to the battle of open source a couple of decades ago, where commercial organizations struggle with the thought of, hey, I charge this much money for my product, why would I ever give this out for free? and that was also a contentious battle where over time we were able to get to the point where those organizations understood or could see the value in, while I may have a premium product that I charge for, there is value in having a base product that a lot of people can benefit from that ultimately benefits me. So one example would be Oracle, right? Oracle makes a ton of money from selling the Oracle database, but they also have the MySQL database that they make available to everyone for free, and they're able to retrieve value from that in different ways. So, again, my thoughts on data are that data is an asset of humanity, and there are different types of data, and there are different quality of data. And I guess it's beholden to the purveyor of data to determine what level of data am I willing to share? What level of data do I believe is actually intelligence that is for my company or my country or my, whatever that is. And I think that we'll eventually get to a balance where, because thinking about healthcare, there is a portion of healthcare data that will be beneficial globally, from NHS, from any country, right? And then there's a portion of that data that is very pertinent to that country, and then there's a portion of that data that's pertinent to that individual, right? And it's various tiers of control that you would want to apply to these data sets.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Deji. So we have one last question. We'll deep dive into that before wrapping up. And I'll pose this question to Dr. Deo. Looking at the level of VR, AI, machine learning language, interacting with human bodies, is there notable effects that could arise long run in our bodies? And this question is more about our health and technologies. Are there any effects to that effect? Yeah.
Thank you for the question. I can't really give a straight answer.
Dr. Deo, I think there's something you're not very clear.
Some of the sensors which extract data from our bodies. Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you. You are a bit slow. It's sluggish before this. I think there's something with the internet problem. Dr. Deo, I'll jump to Dr. Henry. I'll jump to Dr. Henry as you're sorting out your internet issue. Dr. Henry, how would you address this issue?
Yeah, so
yes, Dr. Henry, please continue.
Yeah, so there's a lot of discussion regarding the effect of all these wearables. Like, I'm wearing my watch, I'm wearing this, I have a patch which releases medication, I have a patch which is used for vaccination, and also artificial intelligence. One of the things that can be harmful, and I think Dr. Deo mentioned at the beginning, is the data that you get to predict or to make a prediction, to train your machine to do prediction. We have to be very careful in what kind of data we're using, the quality of that data, and the biasness of that data, so that when we go and do some predictions, it doesn't become harmful, whatever we are predicting. So there's aspect of data quality. On the other side as well, sometimes going outside your house is a good thing. So sometimes technology puts us indoors most of the time, simply because it's no longer necessary for us to go out. We all experienced the events of the last 2 years where you end up being indoors for 2 weeks without even going out. So how do we use technology not to prevent us from being healthier? And so I see a lot of challenges in those areas, because now I don't need to go to the hospital because I can sit on my machine here and get telemedicine consultation, and then I'm done. You can lose that human touch. But also technology brings a lot of opportunities to open better doors and to even provide more high quality of services. So I'm not worried a lot about the side effects, but how do we set ourselves as a community in order to make sure that we can capitalize on technology without creating a lot of challenges? I'll give you an example. There's now, we are doing research on patches where instead of you taking a medication, you can just put a patch which your body can attract, can absorb that medication or vaccination slowly. So imagine you have that patch and you have kids indoors in your house, which they see is fun because daddy or mommy did it yesterday. They start taking medications because it's fun. So that can have side effects if we don't create enough preventive measures to avoid a more serious repercussion of technologies.
Thank you very much for your contribution, Dr. Henry. I'm going to call on Frank. Frank, can you please open the forum so that for those who have raised their hands to ask any questions to the participants? Frank, can you open the forum to the people who would wish to have direct questions to the panelists?
Start with resilience academy model, maybe. Just looking at the sticky notes now. So we have a number of
Speaking of the negative side effect of technologies.
So we lost our moderator.
We lost our moderator.
So someone can volunteer.
We are very sorry.
We're back. Sorry about that.
Yes, we had an internet issue, so we are very sorry for this.
Was that doing a product launch and it failed right in the middle of it? Was it Bill Gates? So you're not the first, don't worry.
There was one person who has raised his hand, but right now I can see he's not here anymore. So we can just proceed.
I'm going to blame it on Tanesco, Luku. Yeah, sorry about that again. Automation, fourth industrial revolution problems. So as we're waiting for Frank to open the lines for the questions to come in.
Tony, the person who
Yes.
has raised his hand is not here anymore.
He raised his hand and he's left.
Yes, I think the fourth industrial revolution
those are the challenges of the fourth industrial revolution, and we have to accept them. All right, so thank you very much to all the participants who took their time to be here and to share their 2 cents. I have greatly enjoyed this session with you all. I have learned so much from you. I hope you have also learned much from each other. I hope that we can also follow up on each other's work, and I strongly encourage you to follow up on Professor Ang's work. He has shared, I think he will share the link again to his profile, into his research, and whoever who's interested in pursuing this topic further. I know we've leaned on health, but there is so much more to the fourth industrial revolution. We have also looked at the banking sector. We have deep dived on the areas of the job and the whole concerns of data. We have grilled the data, the people who are holding the data, and we wish for them to open doors on this area. This is a conversation that should not stop here. We should create more platforms to discuss this further, so that we can reach the place that we want to reach, and to maximize on this whole revolution of the fourth industrial revolution. So without taking so much more time, I would like to thank each one of you very much, and I hope we continue this conversation in other platforms. Thank you very much on behalf of Mwananchi Communication Limited and Habari Hub for your time. Thank you. Asanteni sana.
Thank you.
Thank you for organizing this. Definitely would like to keep the conversation going.
Indeed, indeed.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.